Imagine stepping into an elevator, expecting nothing more than a short ride to your room, but instead finding yourself at the center of one of the most disturbing mysteries of the 21st century. A young woman, alone in a hotel known for its sinister past, behaves in ways so bizarre and unsettling that millions of people who later watch the footage are left with goosebumps and unanswered questions. Within weeks, that same woman will be discovered in a place so improbable, so horrific, that her story becomes etched into internet history forever. This is not a ghost story. This is not a campfire tale designed to send chills down your spine. This is real. And it is one of the most chilling true crime mysteries ever recorded. Her name was Elisa Lam. At just 21 years old, she was a bright, curious student with dreams, struggles, and a thirst for adventure. Born in Vancouver, Canada, Elisa was the daughter of immigrants from Hong Kong who ran a small restaurant. She grew up bilingual, speaking both Cantonese and English, and was known for her thoughtful, introspective nature. She loved fashion, literature, and blogging. In fact, she maintained an active Tumblr blog where she shared her feelings openly, sometimes cheerfully about books and art, other times with raw honesty about her battles with mental health. Elisa was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and depression, and she didn't shy away from talking about it online. Her blog became a digital diary where she discussed not only her struggles, but also her hopes. She often posted inspirational quotes and photographs that reflected her state of mind. Friends described her as quirky, intelligent, and sensitive. She was a dreamer, but also a young woman weighed down by the pressures of her own mind. And like so many people her age, she wanted to see the world. In early 2013, Elisa embarked on a solo trip through California. She had planned the trip as part of her desire to escape the monotony of school and routine, to immerse herself in new cities and experiences. She traveled by train and bus, carrying only what she needed, moving from one hostel to another. For Elisa, this was more than just tourism. It was self-discovery, a chance to explore independence. She chronicled parts of her trip online, her posts filled with excitement about what lay ahead. But threaded through those entries were hints of fragility, the struggles she carried with her no matter where she went. When she arrived in Los Angeles, Elisa booked a room at the Cecil Hotel, a building with a history as dark and twisted as any crime story ever told. The hotel was built in the 1920s as a glamorous destination for wealthy travelers, but the Great Depression quickly changed its fate. Over the decades, it became infamous as a haven for crime, violence, and despair. Located in the heart of downtown Los Angeles near Skid Row, the Cecil attracted not only travelers on tight budgets but also those with nowhere else to go. Drug users, the homeless, and the mentally ill filled its hallways. It became a place where the line between the living and the lost blurred. The hotel's reputation grew darker still when it became connected with death after death. In the mid-20th century, it was the site of multiple suicides. Guests threw themselves from upper floors. Others overdosed inside their rooms. And as the years went by, the Cecil Hotel also attracted predators. Richard Ramirez, the infamous Night Stalker, lived at the Cecil in 1985 during his murderous spree, coming and going unnoticed as he killed in Los Angeles. Later, another serial killer from Austria, Jack Unterweger, stayed there while committing his own horrific crimes. With so much darkness concentrated in one building, the Cecil earned the nickname, the Suicide Hotel. For most guests, the Cecil was simply a cheap place to stay. But for others, it became a place of nightmares. Its halls seemed to absorb the despair of those who had come before. The building itself, with its faded Art Deco architecture and worn interior, seemed stuck in time, hiding secrets in every creaking floorboard and shadowed corner. It was into this unsettling atmosphere that Elisa Lam checked in on January 26, 2013. She had been traveling through San Diego, where she visited the zoo and posted pictures online, and Los Angeles was her next stop before continuing her adventure north. At first, Elisa shared a room with other travelers, but her odd behavior reportedly unsettled them. The hotel staff decided to move her into a private room. To the casual observer, this might not have been unusual. After all, many travelers act differently when alone and far from home. But with hindsight, this detail would later take on a chilling significance. Elisa continued to explore the city during her stay. She visited bookstores, cafes, and tourist attractions. She called her parents regularly to check in, a sign of her closeness with her family. On January 31st, she was supposed to check out of the Cecil Hotel and head toward Santa Cruz. But she never did. For her parents, who hadn't heard from her that day, alarm bells began to ring. Elisa was consistent about calling even while traveling, and the silence was out of character. Concerned, they contacted the Los Angeles Police Department to report her missing. The LAPD began searching the hotel, questioning staff and guests, but found no sign of Elisa. Flyers with her photograph were distributed, and the case began to gain attention. At this point, she was just another missing person in a city with thousands of unsolved disappearances. But within days, something would surface that turned her case into an internet obsession. When police released surveillance footage from the hotel's elevator, the world got a glimpse of Elisa Lam's final known moments. The video, captured on February 1, 2013, showed her entering the elevator in a red hoodie and shorts. What followed was unlike anything detectives, or the millions who would later watch, had ever seen. Elisa presses multiple buttons, then steps in and out of the elevator erratically. She moves strangely, peeking around corners, hiding in the doorway, stepping back inside, and then back out again. Her hands make unusual gestures, as if she is signaling to someone unseen, or perhaps fighting off something only she could perceive. Times she looks terrified, at other times confused. The elevator door remains open far longer than it should, almost unnaturally, as if frozen in time. Elisa finally steps out of view, and the doors close. That is the last confirmed sighting of her alive. The video was uploaded to the internet, and it spread like wildfire. Within days, millions had watched it, dissecting every frame for clues. Some said she was clearly hiding from someone. Others insisted she was under the influence of drugs or suffering a mental health episode. Still others suggested something paranormal was at play, pointing to the Cecil Hotel's haunted reputation. The footage, grainy and eerie, became an internet sensation. For many, it was one of the most unsettling videos they had ever seen. But while the world obsessed over the mystery, Elisa was still missing. Her family, devastated and desperate, waited for answers. The police continued their search, combing through the hotel and surrounding areas. But no trace of her could be found. Guests at the hotel carried on with their stays, unaware that the building they slept in concealed a horrifying secret. Weeks later, after repeated complaints from guests about low water pressure and a strange taste in their tap water, maintenance workers climbed to the roof of the Cecil Hotel to check the water tanks. What they found would shock the world. The elevator video was only a few minutes long, but those minutes ignited a storm that would ripple across the world. At first glance, it seemed simple: a young woman in a red hoodie, stepping into an elevator. But the more people watched, the stranger it became. The longer they stared at the screen, the more unsettling details seemed to emerge. The video felt less like a standard surveillance clip and more like something out of a horror movie. Elisa steps into the elevator, calm at first, as if she is simply going to her floor. She presses several buttons on the control panel, far more than most people would in one go, almost as if she is desperate to make the elevator move faster. Yet the elevator doesn't budge. The doors stay open. She leans forward, peeking out, then darts back inside, pressing herself into the corner as if hiding from someone. Then her behavior shifts again. She takes small, quick steps in and out of the elevator, almost like a child playing a game of hide and seek. She peers out into the hallway cautiously, her head darting back and forth, as if someone could appear at any moment. Suddenly, her hands move in a strange, unnatural way. She stretches her arms out and twists her fingers in odd shapes, as though she is talking with her hands to an invisible figure. Some viewers said it looked like she was casting a spell. Others thought she was trying to push something away. The gestures were erratic, jerky, and difficult to interpret. The strangest part was the door itself. Elevators are designed to close automatically after a few seconds, yet in the footage, the doors remain open long after they should. Even after Elisa steps in, presses buttons, and steps out again, the doors stay frozen. Some suggested she had pressed the door hold button, which could have caused a delay, but the timing still felt unnatural. Conspiracy theorists pointed to this as evidence of something tampered with, or even something supernatural. Eventually, Elisa steps out of the elevator entirely. She walks down the hallway, disappearing from view. Only then do the elevator doors close, sliding shut as if nothing had happened. It was the last known moment she was seen alive. When the Los Angeles Police Department released this footage on February 14, 2013, their intention was simple: to seek the public's help in locating the missing woman. What they didn't anticipate was that the video would spread across the internet like wildfire. Millions of people watched it, shared it, debated it, and obsessed over it. Within hours, it was uploaded to YouTube, where it was replayed, slowed down, and analyzed frame by frame. Comment sections filled with theories ranging from logical to bizarre. Some viewers were convinced Elisa was hiding from an attacker, possibly a stalker. Others insisted she was under the influence of hallucinogenic drugs. And then there were those who saw something darker, something unexplainable, pointing to the Cecil Hotel's grim reputation as evidence that Elisa's actions weren't entirely her own. The video became a viral phenomenon. News outlets picked up the story. Reddit threads exploded with speculation. Amateur sleuths began digging into every available detail of Elisa's life, searching for clues in her Tumblr posts, her travel plans, even the expressions on her face in the video. Was she running from someone? Was she in danger? Was she having a mental health crisis? Or was she being influenced by something beyond the realm of human understanding? People who had never heard of the Cecil Hotel suddenly knew its name. Its history of suicides and murders was dragged back into the public spotlight. Internet users around the world began calling it cursed, a place where evil thrived. Some pointed out eerie coincidences, movies with similar plots, ghost stories that seemed to mirror Elisa's situation, and strange parallels to other real-life cases. The Cecil became a symbol of darkness, and Elisa Lam became the face of its mystery. For Elisa's family, the video was devastating. To them, it was not entertainment or viral content. It was their daughter, behaving in ways they struggled to understand. They knew her struggles with bipolar disorder and depression, but the footage raised more questions than it answered. Could her mental state alone explain her behavior? Or was something else happening in those hallways? As the video's reach expanded, strangers began to feel a personal connection to Elisa. Her Tumblr posts were scoured for hidden meanings. Every quote, every reblog, every word she wrote was examined as if it contained secret clues to her fate. Some claimed her posts revealed a downward spiral. Others believed they reflected the normal musings of a young woman trying to make sense of her life. But the more people looked, the more obsessed they became, spinning theories from fragments. Online detectives weren't the only ones struggling with the case. The police themselves faced a daunting task. They had searched the hotel, including parts of the roof, but Elisa was nowhere to be found. Sniffer dogs had been brought in, but their searches led to dead ends. The sheer size and layout of the Cecil made it difficult. The building was a maze of hallways, stairwells, and hidden spaces. Still, detectives pressed forward, interviewing staff and guests, but no one could provide a clear answer. Meanwhile, the hotel continued to operate. Guests came and went, most unaware of the growing internet storm outside. For them, the Cecil was just a budget hotel in downtown Los Angeles. Yet behind its walls, the mystery was deepening. Then, complaints from guests began to increase. Some reported that the water pressure in their rooms was unusually low. Others said the water that did come out of the taps was discolored, with a strange taste and smell. At first, maintenance staff thought it was a plumbing issue, nothing out of the ordinary for an aging building. But when the complaints continued, they knew they needed to check the rooftop water tanks that supplied the hotel. On the morning of February 19th, a maintenance worker climbed to the roof. The tanks were large, heavy metal cylinders, each capable of holding thousands of gallons of water. A ladder ran up the side, and on top were small hatch openings used for maintenance access. The worker opened one of the hatches and looked inside. What he saw would become the horrifying climax of Elisa Lam's story. Inside the dark, cold water, floating face up, was the body of Elisa Lam. She had been missing for nearly 3 weeks, and now she had been found in the most shocking place imaginable. The workers' discovery would horrify not only the staff and police but also the world, once the news became public. Guests at the hotel, who had unknowingly been using that water for days, would later be traumatized by the revelation. The mystery had only deepened. How had Elisa ended up in the tank? The rooftop door was locked and alarmed, requiring a key to access. The tanks themselves were heavy, difficult to climb, and the hatch was not designed for easy entry. Yet somehow Elisa had gotten inside. There were no signs of how she managed it. No witnesses who saw her on the roof. No security footage capturing her final movements. The discovery of Elisa's body raised more questions than it answered. And as investigators struggled to piece together the truth, the internet only grew louder with speculation. Was this a tragic accident, a calculated murder, or something else entirely, something beyond comprehension? The chilling truth was that even with her body recovered, the mystery was far from solved. And the deeper investigators looked, the stranger it seemed. When word of the discovery spread, the Cecil Hotel instantly transformed from a place of cheap rooms and quiet anonymity into the epicenter of worldwide attention. Guests who had been brushing their teeth, drinking from the taps, and showering in the hotel's water were horrified to learn that for nearly 3 weeks, the liquid they used had been contaminated by the decomposing body of a missing woman. The media swarmed the hotel, cameras flashing, reporters demanding answers, and police scrambling to contain the growing chaos. What had already been a strange missing person case now erupted into one of the most disturbing urban mysteries the world had ever seen. Elisa's body was carefully removed from the tank and sent to the coroner's office for autopsy. The process was complicated by the fact that she had been submerged in water for so long. Decomposition had set in, and some details would never be entirely clear. Still, forensic experts pressed forward. They wanted to know, was this an accident or had Elisa been the victim of foul play? The autopsy revealed no obvious signs of trauma. There were no stab wounds, no bullet wounds, no evidence of strangulation. Her body bore no marks of a struggle that might suggest she had been attacked or forced into the tank. Toxicology tests were conducted to determine whether drugs or alcohol might have played a role. What they found was striking. Elisa's blood contained traces of prescription medication, drugs consistent with the treatment of bipolar disorder. Specifically, she had been prescribed multiple medications, including mood stabilizers and antidepressants. But the levels in her system suggested she had not been taking them consistently. Some doses were missing. This detail immediately caught the attention of both investigators and the online community. If Elisa had stopped taking her medication or had been inconsistent, could it have triggered a mental health episode severe enough to explain her behavior in the elevator and her eventual death? Perhaps she had wandered to the roof in a manic or psychotic state, climbed into the water tank herself and drowned. To some, it seemed plausible. To others, it was far too simple an explanation for such a bizarre case. The official coroner's report, eventually released, listed her death as accidental drowning with bipolar disorder as a significant contributing factor. But the report was not enough to quiet the storm of speculation. Instead, it seemed to pour gasoline on the fire. For many, the unanswered questions loomed larger than the conclusions. How had Elisa even reached the roof? The hotel's roof access was restricted. The doors were locked and alarmed, requiring a staff key. The only other way up was through fire escapes that were difficult to reach. Even if she had somehow bypassed these obstacles, how had she managed to climb into the tank? The tanks were nearly 10 feet tall, perched on metal stands, with heavy lids that were not designed for easy lifting. A young woman, alone and disoriented, managing this feat seemed almost impossible. Then there was the matter of the elevator video itself. Those who had seen it could not forget the unnatural way the doors stayed open, or Elisa's strange gestures, or the look of fear that seemed to flash across her face. If this was merely the result of a mental health crisis, why did the footage feel so sinister, as if someone or something else was present just out of frame? As questions mounted, the internet's obsession with the case deepened. Online forums filled with amateur detectives who pored over every detail of Elisa's trip. They tracked her final days, piecing together her movements through receipts, blog posts, and witness accounts. Her Tumblr became a shrine of sorts, a place where strangers left comments and speculated on her state of mind. Theories bloomed in every direction, some grounded in reason, others spiraling into the bizarre. One theory suggested that Elisa had been murdered by someone at the hotel, perhaps a staff member who had the keys to the roof. Another claimed she had been stalked by an unknown figure, lured or forced into the water tank. Some pointed to the hotel's dark history, claiming that whatever malevolent energy lingered in the Cecil had claimed another victim. Paranormal investigators descended on the hotel, convinced that Elisa had encountered something otherworldly in those hallways. The media fed the frenzy. News outlets ran headline after headline about the water tank mystery, often sensationalizing the more lurid aspects of the story. Television specials revisited the Cecil's grim past, reminding viewers of serial killers and suicides, painting Elisa's death as part of a cursed legacy. The hotel itself became infamous, attracting tourists who wanted to glimpse the place where it had all happened. What was once a forgotten building in downtown Los Angeles now stood as a monument to tragedy. For Elisa's family, the attention was agonizing. They filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the hotel, claiming negligence for failing to secure the premises and prevent Elisa from accessing dangerous areas. The hotel, in turn, argued that there was no reasonable way they could have foreseen such an event, and that Elisa's mental health struggles were ultimately to blame. The legal battle added another layer of complexity, but it did little to resolve the public's lingering doubts. Even the autopsy report itself contained mysteries. There were inconsistencies in the toxicology results, with some tests inconclusive. The decomposition from the water made it difficult to determine exact timelines. Some observers noted that the report's wording seemed vague, leaving room for interpretation. The internet seized on these ambiguities, twisting them into new theories. As weeks turned into months, the case refused to fade. Documentaries were produced. Podcasts dissected the story. YouTube videos analyzing the elevator footage racked up millions of views. People from every corner of the world felt invested, as though solving Elisa's mystery had become a communal task. Some compared it to a modern-day urban legend, except this one was tragically, undeniably real. Yet for all the theories, all the debates, all the attention, one truth remained unshakable. No one could say for certain how Elisa Lam ended up in that water tank. Every explanation seemed to open new questions. If she had climbed in herself, why? If someone else had put her there, who? And how had they managed it without leaving evidence? If the doors to the roof were alarmed, why wasn't an alarm triggered? And what of the elevator video? Was it malfunction, manipulation, or something more sinister still? The Cecil Hotel itself seemed to loom over the case like a character in its own right, its dark history blending with Elisa's tragedy in a way that blurred the line between fact and folklore. And as the public's fascination grew, the story began to take on a life of its own, transcending the boundaries of police reports and court documents. It became a puzzle with missing pieces, a riddle that refused to be solved. And just when investigators thought they had exhausted every avenue, a new theory emerged, one so shocking, so disturbing, that it reignited the obsession all over again. The official ruling of accidental drowning should have been the end of the story. With the autopsy complete, the toxicology report filed, and the coroner's signature in place, the police were ready to close the case. But for the public, and for those who had followed every twist and turn, the conclusion didn't feel like an answer. It felt like a curtain hastily pulled over something no one wanted to confront. When the details of Elisa Lam's autopsy were made public, readers pored over the technical jargon with obsessive intensity. Some noticed small irregularities, contradictions that seemed to raise more questions. The report stated there were no signs of physical trauma, yet some internet sleuths pointed to ambiguous wording about bruising that could not be explained. Toxicology reports showed she had taken some of her prescribed medications, but others were absent, suggesting inconsistency. Was this a clue that her behavior was purely the result of an untreated episode? Or was it a convenient explanation for something more sinister? Then there was the issue of how Elisa's body was found. Police reports stated the hatch to the water tank had been left open when the maintenance worker discovered her. Yet later testimony seemed to contradict this, with some accounts claiming the hatch had been closed. If it had been closed, the puzzle became even more disturbing. How could a young woman, disoriented and alone, have managed to climb inside, and then close the hatch above her? That detail alone became one of the most hotly debated points in the entire case. The internet erupted. People around the world argued late into the night on forums, podcasts, and social media. Some said Elisa's death was a tragic accident compounded by mental illness and hotel negligence. Others believed strongly that the inconsistencies proved foul play. And then there were those who dug even deeper, pulling threads from the Cecil Hotel's notorious past and weaving them into narratives that blurred the line between reality and legend. Paranormal theories gained traction quickly. The Cecil Hotel, after all, was a building with a reputation so dark it seemed to cling to its very walls. Guests spoke of strange noises in the night, of shadows that moved where no person stood. The elevator video became central to this theory. In it, Elisa's hand gestures were interpreted as attempts to ward off an unseen force. The way she peeked out of the elevator, frightened, seemed to suggest she was being pursued, yet no one appeared. For many, the footage was not of a young woman in distress, but of a victim under attack by something invisible. But even among those who rejected paranormal explanations, doubts persisted. The roof of the Cecil was not a place one could access easily. Security footage from inside the hotel did not show Elisa taking the stairs or the elevator to the upper floors that night. If she had climbed a fire escape, no one witnessed it, and no cameras captured it. Police argued that it was possible she had used the fire escape unnoticed, but the logistics were difficult to imagine. The idea that she could then climb a massive tank, lift a heavy hatch, and slip inside, all without anyone noticing, stretched credibility. Investigators, under mounting public pressure, revisited parts of the case. They re-examined the elevator footage, tested the doors, checked the alarm systems. Their official line remained firm. No evidence of foul play, no evidence of third-party involvement. Yet the inconsistencies refused to fade. Then, as online communities continued to dig, a shocking theory surfaced, one that seemed ripped straight from the pages of a conspiracy thriller. Just days after Elisa's body was found, health officials in Los Angeles launched a tuberculosis outbreak testing campaign in the Skid Row area surrounding the hotel. The name of the test they used: Elisa. The coincidence was almost too much to believe. A young woman named Elisa Lam dies mysteriously in a hotel notorious for tragedy, and days later, a tuberculosis test with her name appears in the same neighborhood. For conspiracy theorists, it was proof of a cover-up, a hidden agenda, a clue left in plain sight. For others, it was an eerie but meaningless coincidence. Either way, it only added fuel to the fire. The Cecil Hotel's management, overwhelmed by the media frenzy, tried to continue business as usual, but the building was swarming with journalists, tourists, and paranormal investigators. Guests checked in just for the chance to stand in the same elevator, to ride up to the roof, to take photos near the water tanks. The tragedy of Elisa Lam had transformed the hotel into a morbid landmark. And with every new guest came more stories, more rumors, more whispers about strange happenings within its walls. Meanwhile, Elisa's family was left to mourn. For them, the wild theories and sensational headlines only deepened their grief. They filed suit against the hotel, but the case dragged on in court, bogged down by arguments over liability and negligence. To Elisa's parents, none of it mattered as much as the fact that their daughter's life had ended in a way that defied understanding. Yet for the world watching, understanding was the only thing that mattered. Every detail became a puzzle piece, and every inconsistency was treated as a smoking gun. The idea of closure slipped further away with every new theory. Theories branched in all directions. Some believed she had been lured to the roof by another guest, possibly someone she had met in Los Angeles. Others thought she had been the victim of human trafficking or organ harvesting, her body disposed of in the tank as a gruesome cover-up. A growing group insisted the entire case was staged, that the elevator video itself had been tampered with. Careful viewers claimed there were moments of missing time, frames cut, timestamps altered. If the footage had been edited, what was being hidden? Who else might have been in the hallway that night, just out of view? As the months passed, the case showed no signs of fading. Instead, it became one of the internet's first great true crime obsessions. A story passed from forum to forum, video to video, until it took on the quality of legend. Elisa Lam was no longer just a person. She had become a symbol, a haunting reminder of how fragile the line between ordinary life and inexplicable tragedy can be. But beneath all the theories, all the speculation, all the viral obsession, one question refused to let go. In her final moments, what was Elisa Lam really experiencing? Was she running from someone, hiding from something, or trapped in a struggle entirely within her own mind? And just when it seemed the theories could not get any stranger, investigators uncovered something unexpected, something buried deep within the hotel's own history, a chilling connection that would reignite the mystery all over again. The name Cecil Hotel has always carried a strange energy, one that even longtime residents of Los Angeles whisper about with unease. Long before Elisa Lam checked in, the building had become infamous, a place where tragedy seemed to accumulate like dust in its corridors. Locals called it cursed, and for good reason. Since the 1930s, the hotel had been the site of suicides, violent crimes, and unexplained deaths. Some of the most notorious figures in criminal history had walked its hallways. When the story of Elisa's death hit the headlines, many immediately linked it to the building's sinister past. One of the most chilling connections was Richard Ramirez, better known as the Night Stalker. In the mid-1980s, Ramirez, a serial killer who terrorized California with a string of brutal murders, was a resident of the Cecil Hotel. Stories claimed he would return to the building after his nightly sprees, his clothes stained with blood, and walk casually through the lobby without attracting suspicion. Later, another serial killer, Jack Unterweger, stayed there while masquerading as a journalist. He killed women in Los Angeles during his stay, choosing his victims just streets away from the hotel. For those who believe in curses, Elisa Lam's death was merely the next chapter in a long history of suffering tied to the building. The Cecil was seen not just as a backdrop to tragedy, but as an active participant in it, drawing darkness into its orbit. Paranormal investigators pointed to stories of hauntings, of voices whispering in the dead of night, of apparitions flickering in mirrors. To them, Elisa's strange behavior in the elevator was not a medical episode. It was a possession, a confrontation with whatever malevolent force lived inside the hotel's walls. Yet the paranormal explanation wasn't the only one that gained traction. The theory of foul play remained stubbornly alive, fueled by the unresolved contradictions in the case. Online investigators asked how Elisa could have reached the roof if the access was locked and alarmed. If she had taken the fire escape, why wasn't there a single witness? Some speculated that she had been followed, coerced, or even murdered by someone with knowledge of the building's security systems. Suspicion fell on staff members, other guests, even on figures who had appeared in the hotel around the same time. One particularly controversial figure was a musician who had stayed at the Cecil during that period. Because of his dark music videos and disturbing imagery, some internet detectives became convinced he had something to do with Elisa's death. Despite no evidence connecting him to the crime, he received death threats, his career derailed by accusations born entirely from online speculation. The case had evolved beyond investigation. It had become an obsession, and in the process, people were creating villains out of shadows. Then there was the idea of a government cover-up. The timing of the tuberculosis testing campaign, named Lam Elisa, continued to fascinate conspiracy theorists. Was Elisa somehow involved in medical experiments? Did she stumble upon something she wasn't supposed to see? The water tanks became part of this theory too. They weren't just a hiding place for her body. They were part of a larger narrative involving contamination, disease, and control. For many, it was a stretch. But for others, it was the only way to explain the bizarre coincidences. Still, among all these theories, perhaps the most unsettling was also the simplest. The possibility that the elevator footage itself had been altered. When the police released the video, sharp-eyed viewers noticed anomalies. The timestamp appeared corrupted, with missing numbers and distorted displays. Some claimed sections of the video had been deliberately slowed down or sped up. Others swore that frames had been removed altogether, creating gaps in time. If true, it suggested that someone was in the hallway with Elisa, someone who had been erased before the footage was made public. The question then became not just who Elisa was running from, but why the truth would be hidden. As more people studied the video, new interpretations emerged. Some pointed to reflections in the elevator doors, convinced they could see the shadow of another figure standing just out of view. Others analyzed Elisa's gestures, suggesting she was communicating with someone, or even with herself, in a state of delirium. The footage became more than evidence. It became a Rorschach test, with each viewer projecting their own fears and beliefs onto the blurry, haunting images. For some, the most terrifying possibility was that Elisa's death had no larger meaning at all. That it was not the result of a conspiracy, a curse, or a hidden figure lurking in the shadows. That it was, in the end, a tragedy born of chance, of circumstance, of a fragile mind in an unforgiving place. And yet, even that explanation felt unsatisfying. Because if it was truly just an accident, then why did the details refuse to add up? Why did the footage unsettle people so deeply, decades after it was recorded? Why did the case cling to the public consciousness with such unrelenting force? The Cecil Hotel itself seemed to thrive on the attention. Tourists continued to flock to its grim hallways, treating it like a living museum of horror. Investigators, both amateur and professional, returned again and again, convinced they could find something everyone else had missed. The building stood tall in downtown Los Angeles, its cracked windows and peeling paint a silent witness to countless tragedies. And at the center of them all, Elisa Lam's story loomed the largest. But perhaps the most haunting theory of all wasn't about conspiracies or curses. It was about Elisa herself. In the months before her death, she had shared pieces of her life online, writing about her struggles, her dreams, her moments of loneliness. Her words painted a picture of a young woman searching for meaning in the world, battling inner storms while trying to hold on to the light. For those who read her blog posts after her death, the story became even more intimate, even more tragic. She wasn't just a victim in a viral mystery. She was a human being with fears and hopes, with laughter and pain. And yet, in the final analysis, that humanity was often lost in the spectacle. People remembered the eerie footage, the water tank, the theories, but they forgot the person at the center of it all. Perhaps that was the greatest tragedy of the case, that Elisa Lam's life had been consumed by the mystery of her death. Still, one final question lingered, one that kept even the most skeptical investigators awake at night. If Elisa truly had climbed into that tank alone, if her death really was an accident, then how did the security footage come to be so corrupted? Who had tampered with the evidence, and what were they hiding? Because buried in the inconsistencies of that video, in the gaps of missing time, there lay a chilling possibility, one that suggested the truth about Elisa Lam's final hours was far more disturbing than anyone dared imagine. In the end, the mystery of Elisa Lam is less about what can be proven and more about what refuses to be explained. The corrupted footage, the locked rooftop, the unanswered questions, all of it lingers like a shadow that refuses to fade. We may never know if she was a victim of circumstance, of her own fragile mind, of another human being, or of something darker that cannot be named. What we do know is that her story has outlived the official reports, the investigations, even the walls of the Cecil itself. And maybe that's why her case still haunts us. because it forces us to look into the unknown and admit how fragile certainty really is. So I'll leave you with a question no one can agree on. What do you think really happened to Elisa Lam? Accident, conspiracy, or something beyond our understanding? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm reading them all. And if you want more real-life mysteries that will keep you awake at night, don't forget to subscribe.